Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eva Garcia Chueca, and I am the scientific coordinator of the Global Cities program in a think tank based in Barcelona, the Barcelona Center for International Affairs. We will now start a theme session on the right to the city, where we will discuss about housing, about gentrification, and about urban social justice. But before we start, let me make a short announcement. There will be some contributions, interventions in Spanish, so if anyone needs to go outside and collect the interpretation device, please feel free to do it now. So today's session about the right to the city will be divided into two parts. In the first one, we will have two keynotes who will set the scene and who will share with us their views on the right to the city. And after that, a dialogue will take place to discuss more specifically about one of the key elements of the right to the city, which is housing, the right to adequate housing. And in particular, the panel will address the question of how can cities make housing more affordable. From my side, just allow me to share some reflections with you that aim at providing a general framework of the right to the city. As you know, most of the global population today live in urban environments, and the speed of contemporary urbanization has presented a lot of challenges. Challenges in terms of social exclusion, in terms of poverty, in terms of democratic government, or climate change, to name only a few. Against this framework, since the late 80s, there has been a strong mobilization of civil society organizations that have been fighting against urban inequalities and against the financialization of cities, which is a global trend today. These mobilizations and social struggles have been articulated under the umbrella of the right to the city. This concept was coined in the late 60s by a French philosopher, Henri Lefevre, who argued that cities are the result of three interrelated dimensions. First, there is a material dimension related to access to material resources, which are key to ensure good living conditions to all urban dwellers. And this material dimension includes access to urban services, to infrastructures, to public transportation, to housing, to livelihoods, to employment opportunities, etc. A second dimension of city making is the political dimension. The political dimension refers to the possibility to exercise the full content of citizenship through access to government structures and policy-making processes. So here we are referring to democratic and participatory government at local level, to transparency, to accountability, etc. And finally, the last pillar highlighted by Lefevre is the socio-cultural dimension, which is related to diversity, to social mixture, to identities, to heritage, to collective memory, to cultural practices and socio-cultural expressions. So the right to the city entails ensuring access to all inhabitants to these three dimensions of city making. As mentioned before, this narrative, the right to the city, has been an important political flag historically used by civil society organizations and social urban movements, but it has to be noted that more recently it has also been claimed by some local governments and city networks. The movement started in Latin America, particularly in Brazil, but it was also relevant in other Latin American countries like Colombia, Ecuador, Mexico, or Argentina. Later, it also became a political flag in other regions and other countries like South Africa, Germany, Turkey, Spain, or the United States, to name only a few examples. In parallel to these national dynamics, the right to the city also gained international momentum with the organization of World Social Forums and some UN summits like Habitat, for example. On the occasion of these events, a number of urban social movements, civil society organizations, local governments, and city networks have used the right to the city to propose alternative models for cities that foster urban justice and equality. We will have the chance to know more about these processes with our invited keynotes. And the first one to intervene will be Ricard Gomà, who will talk about new municipalism and the construction of the right to the city. Ricard Gomà is the director of the Barcelona Institute of Regional and Metropolitan Studies since 2015, and he's also professor in political sciences at the Autonomous University of Barcelona. So, Ricard, when you are ready, the floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon. Thanks very much. I'm very glad. I'm very grateful for your invitation here, Eva. If you don't mind, I will turn now into Spanish, and I feel better to deliver my thoughts and feelings to you. Mi intervención, tal como ahora Eva comentaba, va a ser una intervención panorámica con algunas reflexiones generales sobre derecho a la ciudad y el municipalismo como esfera de construcción del derecho a la ciudad, para después entrar ya en cuestiones más concretas y de debate en otras intervenciones. También lo comentaba ahora Eva, el derecho a la ciudad es un concepto que tiene un cierto recorrido histórico. No es un concepto emergente, aunque es relativamente nuevo. Seguramente su primera raíz está en la obra de Henri Lefevre en 1968, Le droit à la ville, donde ya se formula por primera vez este concepto. Sí que es verdad que es un concepto que pasa relativamente desapercibido durante un tiempo hasta que a principios de este milenio la politización de la globalización por parte de los movimientos sociales, de manera aparentemente paradójica, refuerza los espacios locales y urbanos. Primer Foro Social Mundial, Porto Alegre, no es casualidad, la ciudad de los presupuestos participativos, de la democracia radical, Foro de Autoridades Locales. La gran idea, otro mundo es posible, y empieza en las ciudades, ¿no? Tanto ahí tenemos un resurgir, ¿no?, de lo urbano, de lo local. Y efectivamente hay un impulso más reciente. El conjunto de movimientos sociales, la Habitat International Coalition, la Plataforma Global por el Derecho a la Ciudad, realizan un enorme trabajo de movilización y de llenar de contenido el concepto de derecho a la ciudad hasta que llega a la cumbre de Hábitat 3 Quito 2016. No es fácil el escenario de Quito. Sabéis que formalmente son los estados los sujetos políticos de las cumbres de Naciones Unidas, pero el movimiento de ciudades y de tejido asociativo consigue arrancar la presencia del concepto derecho a la ciudad en el texto definitivo. Es verdad, seguramente no con la fuerza que hubiera sido necesaria, pero ahí está el concepto. No es un concepto, el de derecho a la ciudad, tampoco sencillo de definir. Implica por lo menos cuatro elementos o cuatro dimensiones. El derecho a la ciudad implica un cambio de escala en la realización de los derechos de ciudadanía. Históricamente habían sido los estados-nación los espacios de construcción de ciudadanía. El derecho a la ciudad implica situar también la construcción de ciudadanía en los espacios urbanos. Por lo tanto, dotar a los derechos de ciudadanía de un espacio de proximidad y de un tiempo de cotidianidad. Otra cosa muy importante, el derecho a la ciudad implica fortalecer aquellas dimensiones más débiles de la ciudadanía social, precisamente porque se habían construido desde el Estado-Nación. ¿Qué dimensiones? Todo lo que tiene que ver con la acción comunitaria, con la cotidianidad, con el reconocimiento de la diversidad, los vínculos, la solidaridad, los cuidados. Eso forma parte también, de manera muy nuclear, del derecho a la ciudad. En definitiva, retornar a la ciudad los horizontes de construcción de ciudadanía, los horizontes de emancipación colectiva, que ya estuvieron históricamente en las ciudades, desde el Renacimiento a la Comuna de París, pero que seguramente el siglo XX se configuró, a mi modo de ver, de manera excesiva, como un siglo de estados. Pues bien, el siglo XXI debe retornar a las ciudades esos horizontes de ciudadanía y de emancipación. ¿Por qué el derecho a la ciudad cobra fuerza recientemente? Quizás debemos considerar tres elementos de contexto que son relevantes para entender que el resurgimiento reciente del derecho a la ciudad eso no es una casualidad. En primer lugar, eso que se ha dado en llamar la era urbana, la constatación de Hábitat 3, el 55% de la población vive en las ciudades. La Unión Europea es un espacio vertebrado por grandes redes transmetropolitanas donde vive la mayoría de la población, pero también donde se genera 3/4 partes de todas las patentes de innovación tecnológica y toda la inversión en R+D. Tanto tenemos ahí un componente importante. Un segundo elemento de contexto. Hemos vivido una crisis importante. Pues bien, los impactos sociales de la crisis más persistentes tienen una naturaleza profundamente urbana. La emergencia habitacional, la segregación residencial, la informalidad urbana, la pobreza energética. Son cuestiones sociales que no pueden resolverse si no se afrontan desde la proximidad, la cotidianidad, el derecho a la ciudad. Hoy podríamos decir que la cuestión urbana de Castells es una cuestión fundamentalmente social. Pero fijaros también que las grandes dinámicas de cambio de época, de cambio de paradigma, tienen una naturaleza profundamente urbana. Sitúan a los espacios urbanos en el centro de esas dinámicas de cambio. Desde el punto de vista económico, la transición digital o la financiarización son profundamente urbanas. Desde el punto de vista sociocultural, las nuevas complejidades sociales, la transición democrática, el envejecimiento, la crisis de los cuidados, la diversidad de formas familiares, afectivas, culturales, esas complejidades se expresan en la cotidianidad de las ciudades de manera fundamental. O desde el punto de vista ecológico, lo sabemos, el 70% de los gases de efecto invernadero, de las emisiones de calentamiento global, son de raíz estrictamente urbana. Y sabemos también que el principal factor determinante de la contaminación atmosférica son los modelos de movilidad urbana. Por lo tanto, no es una casualidad que en el actual contexto de cambio de paradigma económico, social y ecológico, lo urbano haya resurgido con fuerza y el derecho a la ciudad se haya situado como un concepto con capacidad para vertebrar esa importancia de lo urbano. Una segunda consideración que quería compartir con vosotros es la necesidad de fortalecer los gobiernos locales, el municipalismo, como la esfera institucional para construir el derecho a la ciudad. Es verdad, el municipalismo no es una esfera institucional nueva, ha existido desde hace muchos años, pero seguramente asistimos de alguna manera a un nuevo municipalismo que podemos definir como la voluntad de las ciudades de devenir verdaderos sujetos políticos, de implementar políticas públicas que vayan más allá de la hegemonía de la austeridad. Y también un municipalismo que pretende devolver las instituciones a la ciudadanía, fortalecer los vínculos de la democracia deliberativa participativa. Todo eso forma parte del nuevo municipalismo. Y es verdad, todo eso debe hacerse tangible. Y para hacerse tangible necesita una agenda de políticas públicas, la agenda del derecho a la ciudad, que es una agenda compleja, pero que por lo menos creo que tiene tres dimensiones también. Una primera dimensión, la necesidad de localizar los derechos sociales, como comentaba anteriormente. Las políticas sociales de proximidad, las políticas de educación infantil, de inclusión social, de salud comunitaria, de cuidados, la agenda feminista, la interculturalidad. Esa dimensión de derechos sociales de proximidad. Una segunda dimensión, generar ecología urbana. Todo lo que tiene que ver con la justicia espacial, con la justicia urbana, el derecho a la vivienda, las estrategias contra la gentrificación, las políticas de mejora de barrios vulnerables y también lo que está más directamente vinculado a la transición ecológica, la construcción de eso que algunos autores han llamado las soberanías de proximidad, la soberanía alimentaria, la soberanía energética, la soberanía hídrica o los modelos de movilidad sostenibles. Y finalmente, creo que hay una tercera dimensión también enormemente importante, que es la construcción de economías ciudadanas. si estamos en un cambio de paradigma hacia la transición digital, es muy importante que el derecho a la ciudad incorpore el impulso a las economías colaborativas de plataforma, o que haga efectivos los derechos digitales de la ciudadanía, o que luche contra la brecha digital entre generaciones, o que regule y conecte con el bien común a las economías privadas de plataforma. Por lo tanto, todo eso es enormemente importante. O, finalmente, el derecho a la ciudad también como ese espacio que debe incorporar la transición hacia economías descarbonizadas, hacia economías circulares, verdes, cooperativas. Por lo tanto, esa sería la agenda para hacer efectivo el derecho a la ciudad. Y acabo con una idea, efectivamente, no es fácil y, por lo tanto, implica algunos retos que hoy todavía están por afrontar. El reto de fortalecer los poderes políticos y las capacidades fiscales de las ciudades. Las ciudades deben poder disponer del conjunto de instrumentos para hacer efectivo el derecho a la ciudad. Las ciudades deben aparecer en la gobernanza global multinivel como sujetos políticos, no de manera subordinada, sino articulando interdependencias con los Estados. Por lo tanto, una gobernanza global donde la escala no implique jerarquía, sino interdependencia. Y finalmente, el reto de canalizar procesos de aprendizaje, de transferencia entre ciudades y entre gobiernos municipales. Y de ahí la importancia del ecosistema de redes de ciudades que hoy se está construyendo, ya de manera importante, densa, esas redes de incidencia, CGLU, Eurocities, pero también esas redes de transferencia y aprendizaje, Cities for Housing, Sharing Cities. En definitiva, por lo tanto, creo que ya se me ha agotado el tiempo, en 30 segundos. Las ciudades hoy expresan y configuran tensiones y energías, contradicciones y esperanzas, con mucha fortaleza, seguramente de manera sin precedentes. Y, en segundo lugar, si en esas ciudades se debe construir el derecho a la ciudad como un horizonte de reconstrucción de la ciudadanía en el siglo XXI, es importante dotar de poderes para el cambio y de poderes para la profundización democrática a los gobiernos locales, al municipalismo. Bien, estas serían mis reflexiones así genéricas de entrada, pero espero que sirvan para después poder aterrizar mejor en debates más concretos. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Ricard. No te vayas.
¿Quedo aquí?
Ah, sí.
Vale, no sabía si era yo quedarme aquí.
Sí, no te vayas porque disponemos de unos 10 minutos para tener un diálogo contigo, tanto el público que nos acompaña hoy como yo misma. Me gustaría formularte un par de cuestiones, ¿no? Tu intervención nos ha proporcionado un marco general del derecho a la ciudad, de qué implica. Has aludido a esa vinculación y esa genealogía relacionada con los movimientos sociales urbanos y cómo han contribuido a recuperar ese concepto, un concepto acuñado antes por Lefevre, y sobre todo has centrado tu intervención en exponer cómo desde el municipalismo se ha utilizado el derecho a la ciudad o puede utilizarse para transformar el modelo urbano vigente, ¿no? Que, como has comentado, tiene una multiplicidad de problemas desde el punto de vista medioambiental, social, económico, etc. Hay una cuestión a la que has aludido de manera rápida y en la que creo que sería interesante ahondar un poco más, que es la cuestión metropolitana. Obviamente hoy, en la actualidad, el hecho metropolitano se declina a menudo a través de grandes áreas metropolitanas, grandes regiones metropolitanas, incluso regiones que son transfronterizas, transnacionales, lo cual complica mucho el realizar el derecho a la ciudad de manera concreta, ¿no? Yo te quería preguntar sobre, desde tu punto de vista, ¿cuáles serían los marcos de gobernanza que son necesarios para poder implementar este derecho a la ciudad en entornos metropolitanos y qué políticas metropolitanas podrían acabar traduciendo ese derecho a la ciudad en el territorio metropolitano?
Efectivamente, es un gran tema, la cuestión metropolitana, porque, como comentabas, Eva, seguramente ese conjunto de dimensiones que configuran el derecho a la ciudad, cuando las plasmamos en el territorio, vemos que muy mayoritariamente su dinámica tiene escala metropolitana, ¿no? Y por lo tanto desborda los marcos institucionales del municipalismo. Yo estoy convencido que el campo de juego de la movilidad sostenible es metropolitano, o que el campo de juego de la transición energética es metropolitano, o que no hay posibilidad de construir el derecho a la vivienda si no hay políticas públicas de vivienda a escala metropolitana, ¿no? Pero además, fijaros que podemos tener un municipalismo con fuertes políticas de redistribución en el interior de cada municipio, pero que eso se traduzca en una reproducción o incluso en un incremento de las desigualdades sociales y urbanas intermunicipales, ¿no? Por lo tanto, la necesidad de configurar, ¿no?, un marco institucional metropolitano creo que es perfectamente objetivable. Segundo elemento de reflexión, hay un abismo hoy todavía, ¿no?, entre la contundencia de esas dinámicas y la fragilidad, la debilidad que tienen los marcos metropolitanos de gobernanza de esas dinámicas. Y por lo tanto debe construirse una estrategia de gobernanza para cerrar esa brecha. ¿Qué modelo de gobernanza? Seguramente aquí debemos adoptar una aproximación flexible, no rígida, pero con algunos criterios, ¿no? Si realmente el marco metropolitano es un marco de políticas donde se deriven modelos alternativos, ¿no?, donde se deriven, por lo tanto, cuestiones de fondo no estrictamente tecnocráticas, esa gobernanza debería incorporar una dimensión democrática, ¿no?, porque difícilmente va a poder justificarse, ¿no?, una disputa de modelos en el marco de las políticas públicas sin una institucionalidad que conecte directamente con la ciudadanía en clave democrática. Por lo tanto, yo creo que ahí hay un elemento a recorrer, la necesidad de democratizar la gobernanza metropolitana. Y un segundo aspecto, esa gobernanza metropolitana en clave democrática seguramente tampoco no debe reproducir, ¿no?, las democracias preexistentes y conocidas a escala municipal, ¿no?, sino que debe incorporar elementos de innovación muy importantes que hoy seguramente ya están en los modelos de gobernanza metropolitana. La cooperación intermunicipal, la existencia de redes de geometría variable, algunos aspectos de agencias sectoriales con mucha capacidad de gobernar cuestiones que no solamente son políticas, sino que son técnicamente complejas, ¿no? Por lo tanto, yo creo que hay un puzzle de elementos que deberían conformar esa gobernanza metropolitana que es hoy una necesidad absolutamente contundente.
Me gustaría saber si hay alguna persona del público que desee compartir sus reflexiones, que tenga alguna pregunta para Ricard. Aún nos quedan unos 5 minutitos para terminar, con lo cual...
¿Quién
sí,
se anima?
por favor. Tenemos un micro.
Hola, buenos días. Daniel Lozano de México. Quisiera preguntarle un poco o preguntarles su visión o sus reflexiones en general en cuanto a la gentrificación en México, en diferentes entornos urbanos y de comunidades pequeñas incluso, se está generando este fenómeno. Entonces, ¿alguna reflexión, recomendaciones de cómo atacarlo o cómo enfrentarlo?
Sí. En efecto, la gentrificación es una de las dinámicas urbanas y metropolitanas que hoy se expresan con más fuerza en muchas ciudades del mundo, ¿no? No es un fenómeno nuevo, pero está cobrando mucha fuerza, ¿no? Y es verdad que tenemos bien diagnosticado el fenómeno, ¿no?, que sabemos que la gentrificación es un proceso de sustitución socio-residencial, pero también de usos, ¿no?, que tiene una dimensión residencial, una dimensión productiva, una dimensión comercial, que tiene también una dimensión intangible, cultural, simbólica, ¿no?, donde las nuevas capas residentes redefinen los significados del espacio público, del espacio urbano, del espacio social. Es decir, todo eso lo tenemos bien identificado. Conocemos los mecanismos, los factores de la gentrificación. Mucho más complicado es la definición de políticas para hacer frente a las consecuencias no deseables de la gentrificación. Y ahí seguramente hay algunas indicaciones importantes. La vivienda. con una política pública fuerte de vivienda que permita controlar el alza de precios en el mercado, tanto el alquiler como la propiedad, tienes un instrumento para poner coto al proceso de gentrificación. Una política de defensa de las redes comerciales de proximidad ante las grandes superficies comerciales. Instrumentos innovadores, los comercios de protección oficial, las áreas urbanas de protección comercial. Una tercera dimensión, la dimensión que tiene que ver con los aspectos más, digamos, culturales. Considerar que las políticas culturales deben estar muy presentes, pero deben estar muy conectadas a las necesidades y a las aspiraciones de la ciudadanía residente en las zonas gentrificables. Por lo tanto, equipamientos cívicos de proximidad que conecten educación y cultura, y que respondan a las necesidades de los colectivos residentes. Y otras dimensiones. Dimensiones que tienen que ver, por ejemplo, con la planificación urbana y situar también, ¿no?, la preservación de la vivienda en el núcleo de las políticas urbanísticas. En Barcelona, en estos últimos años, ha habido un ejemplo muy interesante. Una modificación del Plan General Metropolitano que obliga a cualquier promotor privado en suelo consolidado, en suelo urbano, a destinar el 30% de las viviendas generadas a protección oficial y alquiler social. Es un instrumento, seguramente no es suficiente, pero es importante para revertir o para frenar dinámicas de gentrificación. Y una última observación. Seguramente cualquier intervención pública que genere calidad urbana es potencialmente gentrificadora. Y no debemos renunciar a las políticas de mejora de la calidad urbana social en equipamientos. Lo digo porque a veces hay una cierta tendencia, ¿no?, a decir, bueno, pues congelemos la ciudad para no gentrificarla. Si eso fuera así, por ejemplo, los movimientos sociales urbanos no tendrían razón de existir. Los movimientos sociales urbanos, en la medida en que consiguen mejoras sociales y urbanas, son potencialmente gentrificadores. No íbamos a renunciar, no. Lo que es importante es tener ese conjunto de políticas que nos permitan gobernar los procesos de cambio urbano haciendo compatible la mejora de la calidad social y urbana con el derecho a la permanencia de los colectivos residentes.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Ricard. Yo creo que hemos tenido la ocasión de entrar, ¿no?, en algunos aspectos importantes vinculados con el derecho a la ciudad, temas de vivienda, de gentrificación y, en definitiva, tu contribución ha permitido dar un marco, ¿no?, como comentaba antes, un marco general sobre qué es el derecho a la ciudad y qué implica. Ahora, si os parece, vamos a dar paso a nuestro segundo keynote. So we will now give the floor to Diego Fernández. Diego is the Secretary of Social and Urban Integration of the city of Buenos Aires in Argentina, where he leads a regeneration project in one of the city's largest informal settlements, Villa 21. He will share with us this project and he will describe and explain how the city... ¿Tienes PowerPoint?
No, no sí, pero para moverlo.
So you will explain to us this project, this regeneration project in Villa 21, and you will show to us what the city government is doing to integrate this neighborhood to the social and urban fabric of the overall city of Buenos Aires, right? So you say you have a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, I have that over
We need the pointer, I think. ¿Está allá? Sí.
Okay.
¿Quieres hacerlo desde aquí?
No, por acá.
¿Sí?
Well, thank you all for being here. My presentation is about what I like to define as social warming, being this the next big thing. Weeks ago, Google announced that we have reached the quantum supremacy in computing. That means a computer that solved in 200 seconds at the calculation that the most powerful computer in the world took 10,000 years to solve. That was reached something like 2 weeks ago. But we always underestimate non-technological changes. In 2006, for the first time in humankind history, the urban population outgrew the rural population. We are now in 55%, as Ricard told us just minutes ago. And in 2006, none of this technological advancement existed. iPad, Kindle, Uber, Airbnb. I cannot seem to imagine how we managed to live without WhatsApp. And that was just 13 years ago. But in 2006, also, none of these social events had occurred. The Me Too, the Brexit, the Yellow Vests, both Obama and Trump being president, Fridays for Future, the Chile riots. Technological changes amazes us. We always feel amazed about, here we have the new iPad which you can smell, I don't know what's coming next, or you have these new flying cars or whatever. But social changes surprise us. We are not expecting social things, disruptive social things to happen. The technological advancement is hectic, it's exponential. The number of inventions in the last 100 years multiplies several times all of the inventions humankind achieved in the last thousands and hundreds of thousands of years. And the same is happening with the exponential growth of both the urban population and the informal population. Just quoting the UN projections, today we have almost 1,900,000,000 people living in informality out of the 4.4 billion people living in cities. The projections to 2050 is that will be 6.5 billion people living in cities and something between 2 and 3 billion living in informality. Its growth is exponential. The problem is that we, regarding social changes, are as the frog in the boiling water. We don't perceive that the water is getting hotter and hotter and hotter until it boils. Morgan Housel wrote a wonderful essay in which he quotes the three big things that will shape the future to come. And he mentions the shifts in demographics. We are now in the very first time in history in which we find it much more easily to keep babies alive than to have babies. Today, we are growing older. Seniors are getting jobs, and the population is not growing as fast as before. Second thing, wealth inequality. Everybody knows what we're speaking about and the level of criticism that wealth inequality supposes. And the third, and for me this is the game changer, is the absolute access to information. Today, we live in a world where every information is available. The access to information is very equal. I mean, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and Jeff Bezos use the same WhatsApp account as any of we, and use the same Google search as any of us, and the same Google search and WhatsApp account or Instagram account that is being used in any informal neighborhood in the world. That is a thing that changes everything we're living. And I would like to propose social warming as the combination of three of these things going around. The first, wealth inequality. The second, the absolute access to information. And the third, the exponential growth of informal cities. The combination of these things configures, according to my point of view, social warming, which is a crisis as big as the global warming. And let me share some examples of it. This is Kia Sands in Johannesburg. And you can see an informal settlement just meters away from formal housing. Favela do Morumbi in Sao Paulo. Guion Village in Seoul. And my barrio, Barrio 31 in Buenos Aires. That buildings over there are perhaps the most expensive piece of land in Latin America. And just meters away from it, you have Barrio 31, which has been there for 85 years. The type of tension being built in these places and all around the world between the informal and the informal cities with the absolute access to information is something that we need to address urgently. Blade Runner's futures today. Blade Runner is in November 2019. And it depicts a dystopic future. And here you have another science fiction movie, this is Total Recall, where this guy is looking at what seems to be a dystopic city. The thing is, today we are living in a dystopic present, but we don't feel like it because we're living in it. We're part of this dystopia. These science fiction films came to be part of our reality. But the question now is, what can we do about it? And I would like to propose three things. First, do your part. Second, be fluid. And third, speed up the tipping point. Do your part even if it's a micro part. As you all probably know, the Economics Nobel Prize was awarded to Ms. Tulko, Kramer, and Banerjee because of their micro-interventions. And this whole discussion appeared regarding we should go to do micro-interventions and test them and see if the solutions work, or should we move and spend all of our energy in coming up with macro solutions? And it was this big academic debate between the two positions. I honestly completely agree with the Nobel Academy in having given a Nobel Prize to these guys because they did a wonderful job in reducing poverty. It was measurable and it proved successful. And I will share with you the micro part that we are doing in the Buenos Aires city government. We built something like 17 kilometers of infrastructure. That's sewage, drainage, pavement, public lighting. This is a before picture. And this is how now it looks. We are almost finished with just 1 kilometer left of the infrastructure to be done. Second, out of the 10,000 households living in Barrio 31 is one of the most important informal settlements in Argentina, and it's bigger than 65% of the formal cities in our country. That's really crazy. We built 1,100 new houses, and this is the final result. And we also tried really hard to preserve the texture and the logic of the informal settlement. Informal settlements are the medieval cities of the 20th century. The medieval cities were built informally, and we preserve them because we find it nice. And the same thing we need to do, respecting and putting value in the informal settlements. We came up with this really strong project to improve existing households. Following the Quito, the UN recommendation, we already tackled 2,000 houses being improved, and we are in the process of improving 1,000 more. But it's not only about housing and infrastructure. There were no health centers in the barrio. We built 3 new health centers. 2 of them are open. The third is being opened next month. This is my favorite part. This was a narco bunker. It was in the hottest and most difficult and the highest crime in the whole Barrio 31. Narcos lived there. We took that office and we built a center for economic development in the middle of what we called Narcolandia. And now that place is incredible, full of shops and people walking. And now that place is part of the barrio and eventually part of the city. Education. This building was torn apart, and we built there the most advanced school in Buenos Aires and probably in Argentina, with the best infrastructure and the best teachers and the best training programs. Completely disruptive, because we need to give that population chances to get better education just in their doorsteps. Imagine, this was a 30,000 inhabitant cities without a school in it. That's crazy. And we built in this place job training facilities and job training in modern jobs, how to install fiber optics equipment, how to deal with audio installations, and that has proven to be very successful. It's about human beings and their possibilities for development. It's not about building things, but giving human beings possibilities to thrive. And we need to do thousands of micro-interventions. Second thing, be fluid. Today we have fluidity all around. We talk about sexual fluidity, fluid genders. We have fluid jobs. I mean, my father said, you have to work in the same company all your life. Nobody imagines this today. I mean, we change jobs, we change what we do. Demands change, the offer change. We are fluid in many aspects of our lives. And the static logic between governments, the private sector, and the NGOs, the third sector, is unsustainable. It's not working. We need to collaborate. We need to integrate. We need to tear down those barriers, because public sector is obvious what it needs to do, but the private sector is changing as well. Why? Because customers demand companies to make an impact, and the employees demand their companies in which they work to have an impact. A company that today focuses just on its profits is going to fail. It's going to fail because customers won't choose it, and the employees would not want to work in it. In the project in Barrio 31, we did it hand-to-hand with the private sector. McDonald's and Santander installed, they were really courageous, and they installed branches of their companies in the middle of the barrio. And that is a game changer. Despegar is one of the biggest companies in Argentina, sort of a local Expedia for all of Southern America. And they started with this 6-month course given by them on their cost, and they give a stipend to the people of the barrio who take this course, and when they end up, they get a job in the company, and that's amazing. Imagine these girls and boys from an informal settlement getting a job in the most advanced technological company, or one of the most advanced technological companies in Argentina. And what the CEO of Despegar shared with me is that their employees are so enthusiastic about what they're doing that they are taking turns in order to go to the barrio to teach people from the barrio and how to get into Despegar. And this is happening all around, and we need to make it happen faster. McKinsey is another example. They have McKinsey.org, which is an NGO from McKinsey, where McKinsey employees may choose to spend 1, 2, 3 years doing things that really make an impact. And we're working with them in coming up with a complete solution to process all of the trash in the barrio. No institution can do this alone. Third, speed up the tipping point. These are my 3 daughters, 16, 14, and 12 years old, named Juana, Emma, and Lola. They spend a lot of time taking selfies and doing this type of faces. They will change everything, not my daughters. I mean, the Generation Z will change everything. They don't understand the dystopian present in which we live because they're not part of it. They don't understand that people living in an informal settlement next to a formal settlement is something normal. They think that that is completely abnormal. They don't understand that we are not putting all of our efforts in changing the climate crisis. They say, hey, what are you doing? Get out, go to work, make the world a better place for us. And I think that we have the responsibility of moving that tipping point before they come. We have the responsibility of making things happen before. Here we have a problem between problems that move so slow that no one is willing to invest the necessary money, power, and effort to change them. Climate crisis is a perfect example. We need to invest a lot to change something that maybe will not affect me in the next, 5, 7, 10 years. The thing is, this problem happens so slow that we don't feel the necessity to come with immediate solutions. But they happen so fast that the solutions don't get made. So that slow, fast issue is something that we need to solve. I'm a fan of superhero movies. I love the Avengers saga because Thanos is the first good supervillain. He doesn't want something bad for humanity. He wants something good for humanity with the wrong means. I mean, he wants to exterminate half of the population to achieve a sustainable world. And in the Avengers movie, Doctor Strange here analyzes 40,605 possible futures, and in only one, they defeat Thanos, and they succeed. So my question is, what can we do to succeed? What can we do to change this? I am positive, I am convinced that if we put all of the immense power that we as a race, that we as a humankind have to change things, if we keep on meeting like this and thinking about the future and saying, hey, we want to change, if we put all that we have, if we put all hands on deck, we will for sure have a bright future with sustainable and livable cities. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. 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 Muchas graci
Thank you. Thank you very much, Diego, for such an encouraging and inspiring speech. We don't have a lot of minutes for the questions and answers, but we still have 3, 4. So from my side, very, very quickly, how do you see the regeneration project of Villa 21 is linked to the right to the city? Very quickly.
I think that we need to provide the chance of affordable houses being built. And in my humble opinion, there is not a state responsibility just by itself. What we did in Barrio 31, to give you a short example, is we have 500,000 square meters already built in Barrio 31. And when we gave it the city code, I mean, how much can you build, we allowed 800,000. I mean, we created a potential 300,000 more. And who's going to build that? The inhabitants, the local inhabitants, just as they did with the barrio that today exists. And that is part for me in how to give the citizens a right to the city.
Thank you. Is anyone from the audience who would like to pose a question, make a comment, share a reflection? We still have 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, please. There is a micro there in the middle of the corridor.
A question for Diego. Could you give us your impressions, for example, with what's happening in Chile? You mentioned about the Chilean riots. That wasn't something we would believe would be happening today. What's your opinion about it?
It's quite a difficult question because I am a public officer in Buenos Aires city government, and our friends and brothers from Chile are having quite a strong time. To be honest, I'm not an expert in Chile, of course. They are my neighbors, and then I had several friends there. I think that it's a tension between wealth inequality and access to information. I mean, and people are not demanding, hey, I want to fly in private jets and I want to own a yacht. People say, hey, I want to have the access to education. I want to have proper health care. And Chile is just an example. We're having that type of situations all over the world. And we need to address that urgently because otherwise things happen.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Hello, Diego. I had a couple. So on the talk before, Ricard was talking about sort of laying the groundwork to make our cities better. And I was wondering what you guys, so you basically dignified all this community by building infrastructure. What else did you do apart from building the infrastructure in policies or in giving people their titles to their homes or things like this that you think also have like a long-lasting impact in making the city better? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, honestly, I think that building infrastructure is just a mean. It's not the end. The end is, as I tried to share with you in the presentation, is giving everyone equal access to opportunities. Not success, but equal access to opportunities. So the approach that we took with the project is an holistic approach. Health, education, job training, entrepreneurship, development. Of course, building infrastructure, I mean, because you need infrastructure, but that is only the base. The important things are going on top of that.
Thank you very much. Oh, we don't have, okay, very, very quickly.
Great job. Is it going to continue after the change in government in Argentina?
Our government did not change because I work in the Buenos Aires city government and we won and the mayor Larreta got reelected. I mean, we were aligned with the national government that lost and now the terrorism is coming back. But I hope that these things can change regardless of the political party that takes office.
Well, thank you very much, Diego, and also, yeah. And also, thank you very much to Ricard. I think both interventions have contributed to develop a deeper view on the right to the city. I think that Ricard provided a general framework of the concept and also of the main stakeholders that are involved in the implementation of the right to the city. And in particular, he highlighted the role of local governments, networked local governments, or in his own words, of new municipalism, the role it has in advancing the right to the city. And from his side, Diego has spoken about the specific case of Barrio 31, the biggest informal settlement in the city of Buenos Aires in Argentina, and he explained how the city government has been working to regenerate this informal settlement, this neighborhood. Now we will have a 15 minutes break. There will be some coffee at the back of the room. You are all invited to have a cup of coffee if you wish. And we encourage you to use this time, this pause, to network. I'm sure you will have the chance to meet very interesting people. And after the break, as I was saying before, we will have a dialogue, a panel, moderated by Eckhard Hertz about housing, about this specific element related to the right to the city. And we will specifically discuss about how can cities make housing more affordable. So we have a pause and see you in 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
It is with great pleasure that I warmly welcome you to the second part. My name is Eckhard. I'm happy to be your moderator and the moderator of these, the lady and these gentlemen here right next to me. I was fortunate enough to be heading up the national platform Future City in Germany a couple of years ago. And as I'm sure you know, with these big projects that this was, because there were 4 federal ministries involved and 150 experts all over, coming from all different parts of economy and academia. There were a couple of general findings, and one I would like to share with you. There was this one finding that we basically already have all the technology to make cities efficient. The only thing that is missing is linking the people and engaging the people in this development. And in addition to that, we also need to look at different households, and that's why I'm really happy that you're here, because affordability is something that is extremely important, especially when it comes to all this technology out there that I'm sure you know is rather pushing the limits and pushing the prices a little higher rather than bringing them down. Some do, of course, but I'm sure you know what I mean. Some people say time is money. I think time is life, and I'm very happy that you spend your lifetime here with us. So thank you very much for coming along. And I'm very happy to introduce you to the first speaker. Is here on your left side, so to speak, is Damiano Avellino. He actually is the vice president of Fair B&B. So there's a difference, Fair B&B, not Airbnb. And it's actually a great platform that is actually supposed to work for the people, if I'm not mistaken. So please put your hands together and warmly welcome Damiano. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, I'm Damiano, one of the co-founders of Fair B&B Cooperative. Basically, Fair B&B is a platform that actually allow people to rent and book apartment in a sustainable way. We try to solve some of the distortion of the present sharing economy model. We are now releasing in 5 cities, Bologna, Barcelona, Valencia, Amsterdam, and Venice. But in 6 months, we hope to be in all Europe, and we hope to show that it's possible to have another type of sharing economy that works for everyone. I will tell you a little bit about our story and our challenges in make a company that is not a normal venture capital funded exit profit-seeking company, but actually a different type of company. So basically, in different cities, the one that I named, a different group of people started to think of possible alternative to the present touristic model that actually transformed our cities in commodities. So a model that was forward by these platforms that allowed people to rent a spare room or a second house quickly became began to turn in a vehicle for speculators. So you have landlords with entire buildings that actually, instead of putting these houses for the residential market, give them for short-term rental. This is causing gentrification, touristification of our cities, and things that we have been hearing before. So what we did, we started at the end of 2016 with a political manifesto. We tried to envision a possible platform that that could turn the problem into an opportunity. And so from there we started this long journey. And basically in 2017 we tried to think what we have to do, maybe be more activists or try to do a real platform, something that actually people would like to use, so something that could work better both for hosts, for guests, and for the community. Finally, after this long journey, we said, okay, yeah, we want to do this. It will be easy. Let's fund a company, actually not a normal company, but a cooperative. We chose the cooperative because actually it is the best form to create partnership, collaboration with local people. That is one of our goals. And from there, we thought, okay, everything is solved. We have a great idea, everything will go just fine. But actually, it didn't went like this exactly. The image is not completely accurate because it wasn't a truly sublime experience. It was just really challenging. And so we faced a problem in securing funding, coordinating from different cities, governance problem, and so on. But after a little bit of work, we are right now at the starting line with very good condition because we received it from a cooperative bank for 100,000 euros. Other cooperative funding are entering to fund our platform. The beta platform is live. We are more than 1,000 hosts and 8,000 user registered and so on. I would like to tell you a little bit more about what we do. So basically, Airbnb is a platform that, as said, allows people to rent their apartment or spare room. But it has some differences compared to the existing one. We wanted to have a message that is really clear and easy to understand. So we tried to go back to the root of what we were doing, so putting the communities and the people at the center. Having an easy message, easy to understand. So what we do, how it works really for Airbnb, we actually redistribute half of our revenue, basically through a very simple business model. We connect hosts and guests, and we keep 15% on every transaction, more or less like the other platforms. Half of it is used to run the cooperative, run the platform, and the other half is given by the traveler to a social project where they travel. So if I go in Barcelona, I spend 200 euros, I can give 15 euros to the social restaurant in Gracia or to the cooperative supermarket in El Gótico, for example. We have also other things that are aimed to limit the negative effect, and this is really important. So how we try to limit the negative effect of gentrification, touristification, and so on. We have the rule one host, one house. So we exclude mega hosts that are those that actually distort more the market. So as a host, you can have maximum one house. This is just for touristic city. And we share the data with the municipality to try to find the shared solutions. I said we are based on we are a cooperative. We believe in cooperative values. We believe that there are other ways of making successful business that actually really put people and communities and the protection of our planet at their core. And the cooperative is one of the few legal forms that allow us to avoid to be both, for example. So the risk is that if you make a super nice project, but then some big company come and give you 1 billion and just buy you out, and this is not possible with a cooperative. And this is, for me, really, really important because it enhances trust. Impact on local community, as said, we redistribute this funding, but we actually try to connect them to create connection among projects, among local actors, and so on. Right now, the beta is really just an initial user experience. The user experience is basically a booking platform plus a little crowdfunding part. But basically, it's just a tool. If we don't onboard existing projects, existing narrative, and so on, it is just a tool. So how we have been thinking about the organization is to allow this crowdsourcing, this peer-to-peer collaboration. And basically, we have a core team that allow the unfolding of this local organization. I say global because it's both local and global. We try to form these local nodes that are made by people and different organizations, the projects that get funded, that meet regularly to rethink the role of sharing economy inside their cities and to explore new possibilities, do projects together, and so on. And then we have working groups that allow peer-to-peer collaboration through online. So if I have an interest in rural tourism, I can find people inside the community that want to work on the same topic. Tourism is not just about where you sleep. It's also about what you consume inside a city. If you think about the fact that tourism accounts for more than 10% of the global GDP, you can imagine how if we are able to use a little part of this value to fuel a solidarity and circular economy, we can really create a lot of impact. I think that if we want to promote a socio-ecological transition, we really should go for the platforms. The digital platforms are the modern infrastructure of the economy. You can vehiculate better product, better services that do not only good to the pocket of few shareholders, but that do good also for the people and the other stakeholders. So just to make you a little example, in Bologna we have this social cooperative with immigrants that actually use the waste of the fashion industry to make clothes and so on. So all these things, instead of having tourists buy a Chinese gadget, you can have them buy local products that actually have a positive effect on the local economy. I was talking with a friend the other day, and I was speaking about the competitive advantage. How can we really be able to somehow compete? And he was saying, no, also be careful how you speak, no? What type of languages, and thinking about it, we can have a cooperative advantage sometimes. When we speak about travel, we speak about intimacy, and cooperative, a model that is not based on the speculation, on the profit, is just something that make the model more authentic, so enhance the trust and make the model replicable and adaptable. So what we do is we try to create this network of communities. So we have this, we promote this network through incentive. You have the intrinsic motivation of participating because you are contributing to creating another type of sharing economy, limit the negative effect of tourism, and so on, but also an incentive that is an extrinsic incentive. So I will receive money for my own project, let's say if I'm a small organization. So in this way, you give more availability to people to collaborate. So we share tools, values, and a clear vision to arrive to this objective. So in the official launch will happen in 6 months. During these 6 months, we will do two main things. From one hand, we will activate the network, so finding projects, partners, so on. And from the other hand, we will improve the experience on our platform. About the platform, we will, in the coming 2-3 months, we will release all the features, the basic features, and then we will iterate processes in order to make the user experience better. From the network activation point of view, we are looking for partners, for social projects, for people that want to contribute to join the project. Our objective is to arrive in 6 months to have more or less 100 new destinations, 10,000 hosts, a distributed organization, a platform that works particularly well, and a developed platform, a developed cooperative that allow the shared decision making. Just to give you an idea, with 50 apartments, you will be able to fund more or less 5 projects with 15,000 euros per year. So we are not talking about huge number. 50 apartments is not so much, and the model is a win-to-win model because basically the hosts earn the same, the guests pay the same, but there is a benefit for the whole community. there is an easy process. So if someone wants to know more, you can just contact us, and we will tell you more. If you know someone that rent or that travel often, or social project that would like to be involved, please be in contact with us. And just the last thing, Airbnb is not only a platform for traveling, but it's a platform that allows collaboration and cooperation at a higher scale. We really need to build another digital economy. Europe owns only 3% of the digital platforms. It's a huge problem. In particular, in the travel industry, Europe is the biggest market of travel, but it doesn't own any of the biggest platforms like Booking, Expedia, and so on. This value gets extracted every year at more than 4 billion euro of value. So let's do something. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Perfect. Great. Damiano, thank you very much. You might have realized that he was speaking a little longer because we had a little bit of change in the presenters. So the last two, Lucia and Catalin, are not able to make it. So we have all the other presentations are coming on, and the next one will be from Lucy. And after the presentations, when everyone presented, then we're going to have this question and answer session. So Lucy is actually coming from New York, a long way from home. Thanks a lot for coming. I was actually really impressed to see your bio, to be honest. She has a degree from the School of Law, a Master of Teachers from Pace University, a Bachelor in Sociology with Political Science, minor from the University of Michigan. Please give her a warm round of applause. The floor is yours, Juicy.
Hi, so I'm Lucy Jaffe. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Housing Policy for the City of New York. And I'm so excited to be here that when I was asked to talk about how New York City is trying to make cities more affordable, I prepared a 35-minute presentation. And Eckhart let me down slowly and let me gently and said, you have 8 minutes. So if anyone wants to hear all of that content that I now have sitting in my inbox, please come find me later, because there's a lot that we're doing and a lot we need to do. Because this problem, in the way that New York City is experiencing it and the way that other cities are experiencing it, is not something that can be solved with just one approach or one program or one thing. So I'll talk a little bit today about the New York City context. I'm going to try not to do that thing that New Yorkers do where we assume everyone knows everything about us. Then I'll talk a little bit about the obstacles that we've seen to this work, and then some of the opportunities. So our overview approach of how we're trying to solve the affordability crisis that we have in New York City is through Housing New York 2.0, in which we're committing to build or preserve 300,000 units of affordable housing over a 12-year period, so by 2026. This is a follow-up to Housing New York 1.0, where we committed to 200,000. New York is a city of renters. This sets us apart from a lot of other cities in the United States. We're home to 8.6 million people, 3.1 million homes, roughly 1 million of which are homeowners and about 2 million of which are for renters. And of those 2 million rental homes, roughly 1 million have some sort of regulation that caps the amount that a landlord can charge or the income that the tenant needs to have who lives there. We are in the midst of a decades-long housing crisis, which we define by our vacancy rate. And so long as the vacancy rate is below 5%, that is considered a housing emergency. Compared to some of my other counterparts in other cities that have experienced these dramatic increases in rents and rent burden over time, New York City has been more of like a slow burn, right? So for decades, we've been in the midst of this crisis, and you can see our vacancy rate has hovered somewhere between 2% and 3%. And actually, it's a lot lower, we do know, at the low and medium parts of the market. Our rent has been slowly increasing for decades. New Yorkers are paying an increasing share of their income towards rent. As you can see, it's grown from roughly 20% in the 60s to about 34% as an average now, which we consider to be rent burdened. And we have many New Yorkers who are paying well over 50% of their income towards rent, which we can consider to be severely rent burdened. This work, however, is getting harder as we seek to make that goal of 300,000 units per year. The challenges that we experience in finding opportunities to build and preserve more affordable housing, it's just getting harder. One is that we have a lack of supply of city-owned land to develop. The costs of development are increasing year over year. There's also a growing fear of displacement and opposition to development that we're seeing not just in the traditional communities where we expect NIMBYism or not in my backyard, but also in lower income communities where any kind of development, including the development of affordable housing, is associated with fears of more gentrification and more displacement. So we're getting resistance there too. And there's also a complicated intersection between a couple really important public policy issues, right? Gentrification and the fear of displacement, and fair housing. New York has a history, like many American cities, of segregation, right? And as we talk about integration, a lot of people are concerned, no, I just need to be able to stay in my home currently. And any discussion about integrating sets off for people the idea about moving white, wealthier people into my neighborhood and pushing me out. Right, so we have this juxtaposition of these two important policies that are at times conflicting for people. We also have a decreasing federal commitment to funding the development of affordable housing and uncertainty at the federal level. And like everywhere else, threats of climate change that are impacting how we need to be thinking about what we build and where we build. But there is some reason for hope. We are finding opportunities. I was in a session this morning where the moderator said that talking about public-private participation and collaboration is so 2009. And I blushed, but then I decided I was going to keep it in my presentation because it actually is critical to how we're doing our work and what we need to do more of. So the first type of collaboration is leveraging private investment. When we do affordable housing deals in the city, a lot of it's about the private funding that we're able to partner with our public sources, right? So we'll have federal, state, and local grants, low-interest loans, bond equity, partnered with private equity and private mortgages. But we need to, and sorry, when I mention private partners, I also mean the nonprofit sector, right? Because 30% of our development teams are nonprofit developers. But we need to create more space for private sector partners that haven't had access before. So we call these minority and women-owned business enterprises, and they're businesses that are owned by women or historically marginalized communities who have been excluded from government contracting for decades. But we know that it's actually not enough to just remove the obstacles, right? There's been so much happening here and so many limitations put on these MWBEs that we actually have to set proactive targets for ensuring that we're going to partner with MWBEs. And on our development projects, we have a 25% requirement for, of the 25% of the subsidy that we're putting into the deal has to translate into contracts with MWBE firms. And in 2017, that translated to $177 million that went to MWBE subcontractors, architects, accountants, et cetera. Another type of really important collaboration is with other cities. And New York is a member of the High Cost Cities Housing Forum, which is organized by Enterprise Community Partners, which is an important nonprofit for us. And they bring together New York, LA, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., other high-cost cities for us to share best practices, advocate for the resources we need at the federal level, and support each other. We need more of that collaboration. I was also here funded by the IUC on Monday talking about New York City's long history of rent regulation because that's a hot topic here in Barcelona. Right? We need to keep innovating by sharing and collaborating. And possibly the most important type of collaboration that we need to be doing right now is with the people that we're serving. Right? And this is not something that we've always done well, but there's an expression that's being used a lot in the United States right now, nothing for us without us. Right? And we need to have create space for meaningful participation for communities. One example of this is with a public toolkit. We were trying to collect a lot of information about segregation and integration in the United States, in New York City specifically. And we created a toolkit to help New Yorkers guide conversations with their friends, their peers, their coworkers around their own individual experiences with segregation and discrimination in the city. And then we gave them an opportunity to upload that information and share it with us so we could really dig in deep on the lived experiences of New Yorkers and add that to the quantitative analysis we were doing and all of the research. In addition to collaboration, We're also experimenting with innovative land use models like community land trusts, right? And with our rental administration demonstration project, the city keeping the land and leasing it out to the private developers who will then own and maintain the buildings as another way that we can generate revenue and ensure that sustainability of our projects moving forward. We also, third, data-driven efficiency, right? We need to be making decisions that are based on data. One example of this is that we were given a gift decades ago of the Housing and Vacancy Survey, which for decades has given us really rich information about our housing stock and about the people who live in it, right? We conduct roughly 20,000 interviews going to units across the city. And this information is allowing us to make better decisions. And one small example is that we realize we don't really have enough information about people with disabilities living in the city of New York. And we're under pressure to change the set-aside of our affordable housing for the number of units that are going to go specifically to people with disabilities. But that's a big decision and one that needs to be based on real data. So with our housing and vacancy survey and the other data we're collecting, we're going to be able to have a better understanding of who the New Yorkers are who are living with disabilities, what types of disabilities, and what kinds of housing are they currently living in, so we really understand how the market is failing and where the city needs to step in. And the final thing that I'll say, it's not up here, right, but there are so many reasons to despair when you have this intractable, decades-long problem. Right? And the thing that we need and the thing that's the biggest opportunity of all is our hope, our optimism, our belief that this can get better, that there are things that we can share with each other, that are lessons that we can learn, and we can continue to attack this problem in new ways. And we have people, I have someone from my team in the audience who's a survey researcher, and she is incredibly smart and incredibly talented and can go anywhere, including the private sector, and make so much more money. Right? But people like her show up every single day to try to attack this problem. And we have to nurture our public servants, we have to invest in them, right? And they have to have a meaningful connection to the work that they're doing, so they continue to believe also that this is a problem that we can attack. So with that, I do encourage, please, I would love to share and I would love to learn from more of you, right? Whatever best practices you all have and ways that we can continue to leverage all of these types of collaboration, please come find me. Thank you.
Give it to me.
Do you need this? Or no?
Thank you very much, Lucy. Actually, your talk reminded me of the situations we face in Berlin, because we have similar situations such as limited blocks of land that we can use for affordable housing, and the rising costs, of course, for building and for construction site. Let's not get into the conversation right now, so we wanted to do that afterwards. So let's welcome Anis and Jonathan. They are both here. They are doing their presentations together. They are both coming from Cape Town, also far away. Thanks a lot for coming. And they both had done some incredible things in London. They are architects and urban researchers. That is Anis, and Jonathan was working on a project called Urban Data and being a research manager. So we are really interested in hearing what the information is that you're bringing to us. It's a proposition as far as I know, but it was an award-winning solution. So let's see what's coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ricard, and thank you for having us, and thank you all for coming. It's one of the last sessions on the last day, so you guys' discipline and resilience is appreciated. As Ricard mentioned, this was a design solution that won the Smart Cities World Expo Congress Award for Innovation Idea last year. So we were invited back to present it to you, and hopefully we can take something out of this. And I'm very privileged to be part of a esteemed panel on how we can make housing more affordable. So what we'll be presenting to you is an alternative housing solution for Cape Town. We've entitled our proposal Daft-Link. Just out of a curiosity, a quick show of hands, has anybody here been to Cape Town? Oh, a couple, yay. More than I anticipated, actually. I thought it might get one, and probably from Jonathan. So that's the image that Cape Town portrays to the world, and it really is a beautiful city. But unfortunately, this is contrasted with the harsh reality that most Cape Townians encounter every day. And this is where our proposition is located. These are the people that we'd like to address. And it's a matter of how they can capture the economic opportunity of their own areas to hopefully climb up the social mobility ladder in order to access more opportunity. Cape Town has a massive deficit in housing supply. The government's housing scheme hasn't met the demand, and a lot of the housing propositions and developments occur on the outskirts of the city, which marginalizes a lot of the people. There's also a deficit, so not all the demand is met. And this is mostly as a result of the legacy of apartheid, which has separated the city. There are also very few economic opportunities at the periphery that I'm speaking about. And that's where our proposition comes in. You can see the graph on your top left shows how the deficit hasn't met the people that require it most, and those are the marginalized and the poor. This is a summary of our proposition. We're looking at a community-funded housing scheme that links potential investors or people with a little bit of money to those with some land. So what we have in Cape Town, or what we have had in Cape Town and in South Africa, a common occurrence was that government would develop one house on one plot of land, which results in an immense amount of sprawl. But what this does mean is that people have land that they can use for their own financial benefit. Our proposition marries principles of design, planning, business, and engineering. And to encompass this, we're looking for people to access socio-economic opportunities that the area has possessed. This will empower local residents to stake a claim in the area, but also to become property investors. As I've mentioned, we've looked at one particular area entitled Delft, and it's located 34 kilometers away from the city. And the middle image, you can see, I'm not sure if this pointer works. No, it doesn't. But the middle image on top center, that's the phenomenon that is occurring. So you have what we call an RDP, which is one house that was delivered by the government. And people have now constructed backyard dwellings in their backyard to access additional income. So they'll rent those units out. This has sort of skyrocketed, where people have now demolished the house that they were presented to by government, and they're constructing up to 10 units on one site, which completely takes advantage of their site, but this is resulting in a negative spatial and urban form. But this huge demand cannot be met by everybody. So only people that have access to finance can do these sorts of things, and those with land can't always. And all people with access to finance don't always have land. So our proposition looks at how can you potentially link the people with the money to the people with the land, and how can this be a benefit to both of them?
Okay, and now for a potential solution. So basically, as Anise said earlier, what we have is we've got people who own land. They've got a plot where they can build on, but they don't necessarily have the money to build on that land. Then we also have, in the same community, as those who don't have land, those who don't own, and those who rent, but perhaps at the end of every month, they have some money that they can pull together and try and invest in something. So the fundamental issue that we find here through research and what we've done in Cape Town is that the biggest inhibitor to people building is a lack of access to finance and a lack of access to capital. Banks in South Africa generally exclude low-income earners from taking bank loans to get home loans. And when they do give bank loans, there's often exorbitant interest rates, up to 25%, which generally is just unethical and unsustainable. So what Delflink really aims to do is act as a facilitator that can link those, the investors who are able to pool money together, to those who are the developers who aim to build. And within this, we hope that Delflink can facilitate an affordable housing process through access to micro-developments and financing opportunities for those who live within impoverished communities. And this way, through the facilitation aspect, you can really start to link people up with necessary expertise that they might not necessarily have had access to before. This is to local governments, building contractors, design services, and so on. So in the spirit of smart cities, there's really opportunity for this to be done on a platform that can really help facilitate the efficiency of a process. So in the case of your developers could go onto an app, they could identify a site condition, and really have access to pre-designed, pre-approved, and pre-financed units depending on their circumstances, and then generate the capital to build on their site and rent out for income. Conversely, on the investor side, an investor could go on the same app, put money into it, whatever money they have at the end of the month, and then really, through the system, track their capital growth over time, and also monitor their dividend payments that would be paid back to them through the developers. So going on this, I won't go into too much detail because I don't have much time. But in terms of delivery mechanisms, there's all these aspects that we see can help for reliable and good construction. This is something in the areas that often happens, where if someone doesn't have access to sort of a safe app that we're talking about, you could very easily pay your money to a contractor who could take your money and never come back. So really there's a whole bunch of aspects that we want to try and facilitate the link between the different role players in the market to try and create a safe process. And also in the aspect of the community, we really want this to benefit the broader community by using contractors from the area, using design expertise from people within the area, and so on and so forth.
So in conclusion, what we are aiming to do is to connect investors to developers, who would in turn deliver housing from the pre-approved, pre-designed units that Jonathan mentioned. We hope that this can positively contribute to the urban form and display some good design and architectural principles. In turn, these developers will create a safer and healthier living environment and create more or improved rental conditions, which will, and also this will also generate economic opportunity for those people that have been marginalized. So since the competition ended last year, what have we done and what have we done with our time? We've established that it's really quite difficult to engage with this environment, but we also gained some clarity as in the role that we'd like to play. We imagine us to be a facilitator to speak to people that are operating in the area or in this field. And we know that these conversations are being had and then these organizations exist. It's just a matter of linking them together. Dealing with public officials or state officials has become increasingly difficult, but we are engaging in conversations with them. We do need public buy-in in order for infrastructure to be delivered. What we're trying to avoid is a sprawling city. And infrastructure can be provided in these areas to improve the chance of people living in a safer, healthy environment and not placing an increased and undesirable load on infrastructural systems. We've also tried to rebrand ourselves a little bit. We've called ourselves at the beginning, or this time last year, we were called Delft Link. We've now adjusted the name to Home Link, identifying that the solution could be applied to multiple areas in Cape Town or in South Africa. We hope that the solution will be taken on board, and I think one of the major issues that we've come across is that we need to pilot and we need finances to pilot. So if there are any investors in the room, please come talk to me afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll stay seated. I hope you don't mind, because we're starting the round of discussion. Well, thank you very much, first of all, to all of you for your presentations. There were some really great and interesting things to look at and to listen to. Probably I start with you, Damiano, because I was wondering what benefits to the community really come. I mean, could you give us a little bit more information about the leverage that you could actually draw out of your platform that you're using?
Okay. So in general, I think that there is something that is easy to evaluate, like how much money can you redistribute. So if we get like 3 or 4% of the market is like 200 million euros that we can redistribute to local communities. But I think that it is really much more, because it's like understanding that we need to face this problem, that right now these platforms, but it's not just related to traveling platforms, but all the platforms are basically what actually we do. Every time that we use our phone, we are generating value that normally get extracted and go in the pocket of some shareholders, often untaxed. And to me, it's shocking, like why I pay like 40% of the taxes and these giants pay nothing. It's something that is completely no sense, no? And I think that sometimes, like, especially in Europe, we should need to find common fights, and this is something that we should all relate, because, I said, we have just 3% of the biggest platform in the world. The 75% are American, the other are from China, and if we fight for better platforms, to create our platforms that are based on solidarity values, on cooperative values, and starting by the platforms of traveling, I think it can be really powerful. So I think that is showing, it's not just about the money that we do for community, but it's showing that it's possible another way to tech.
Could you give us an example? Like, for instance, in Bologna, if you have, how many people do you have? I mean, you know, what size of platform do you have, or how many people have you connected with? And what sort of benefit could you really give back? You mentioned shops, you mentioned other things, so could you make it a bit more tangible?
So we just started in the end. So we have more than 1,000 hosts, but we need to charge them inside the platform. And right now we have 3 projects. One is related to, is a social restaurant, I was saying, is a social cooperative with people that suffer from certain physical handicap, and they make an amazing pizza, actually. And so we try also not only to fund the project itself, but also to create connection for the people that travel, for example. Another project is related to migrants, but in general, the idea is like that you could support all the causes that you care for. So in somehow, Airbnb is also a tool for fundraising for little organizations. So our growth strategy is a collective action. If we want to open in Lyon, we look for 3 organizations that already have a community behind, that trust them, and we ask them to help us in finding the first 15, 20 hosts. So this way, in this way, the model is replicable, adaptable. We can have local people inside the cooperative, so it's not a conquering around. So
So you should actually come to Berlin, because our foundation is in Berlin, and if you say you can do the fundraising for us, that's not a bad thing, right? So do you have a question for Damiano? Please feel free to come up to the microphone. Yes, there is one, please.
Sorry, just to clarify on one point, for the local projects, the person who decides where the funds go is the host or the tourist?
It is the tourist, but actually we are creating this process of a call, an evaluation from the expert, and then there is the local community, so the local node, those that actually meet regularly, that choose which projects are inside the platform.
I was just wondering if the community should also have a say, as in the hosts should have maybe part of the fee for their decision. So
to avoid the fact that you have just hosts that might donate, because we are talking about the 7.5% of the transaction, that for a host can be even a lot, and so it can create some conflict of interest, because you might have 500 euros to give back or 400 euros to give back per month. So we have these local nodes that are made both by host, organization, social projects that help in finding the right projects to put inside the platform, and there is a mechanism so that they reach the minimum amount of funding, and then if the people like it more, they will receive a little bit more funding. That's the basic model.
Any other questions for Damiano? I mean, you could keep them probably. We have a couple more minutes at the end. So I'd love to come to New York, but before I do that, I would like to give you also some information about Berlin, because there are some parallels that I actually see, because we have a huge demand in Berlin from from people coming to us, to the city of Berlin from abroad. So that gives a lot of pressure to the real estate market, which basically leads to an increase of the prices of the land. In addition to that, we have increase of prices for construction costs. So to basically build new affordable homes is extremely extremely hard to do. In addition to all that, it is a city that is already quite dense, and I'm sure New York City is as well. So I was wondering what your findings are, Lucy, in order to probably share your findings with other cities with similar obstacles. Are there any, and what are these? What can you share with us?
About the similarities or about
the findings. I mean, we're talking about the obstacles and the solutions to it. So the solutions for regulations and there are different ways you can tackle the problems and the obstacles.
Yeah. So we are actually on track to build or preserve our 300,000 units, and I think that that's testament to the fact that it takes a lot of different protections mixed in, right? And a lot of different programs mixed in. So we are building and preserving. We have a strong rent regulation system, which creates certain rights for tenants that they wouldn't otherwise have in the market. And it's a combination of, and we're rolling out universal right to counsel, right? So that when tenants end up in housing court, they're there with an attorney and they're not just there with their landlord, right? So it takes all of these different pieces to really be able to solve a problem that's this intractable. And so I think that's one of the biggest takeaways for us, is that it's not just going to be one solution. It's going to have to be a lot of different investments in a lot of different areas.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I was wondering, and we were talking about this beforehand, how to bring down the costs is one of the crucial issues. And when you think about what is affordability, that's different, no matter whether it very much differs from Cape Town to New York, from Berlin, also to Italy. So looking at affordable housing also means a comparison to other costs that other people have. Like, for instance, in Berlin, we have the situation that there are very old contracts that are very good contracts for the tenants, because they pay €3.50, probably maximum €5 per square meter, which is barely nothing, sorry to say so, for a city such as Berlin. Now, of course, if they need to pay more, they are really not too happy. All of a sudden, they're supposed to pay 8 or 10 or even 12. That's part of the reason why the government comes up with the upper rent limit, which is quite interesting. On one hand, it's pretty good because it stops rising the costs and makes living more affordable. But there is already an existing local comparison rent. So this new legislative proposal is something that is highly debated. Why is that so? Because put yourself in the shoes of someone who has rented for €12 per square meter. All of a sudden you have this upper rent limit, and you go back to your landlord and say, please give me back the rent, €2 per square meter for the last year. That makes it very hard for you to calculate, right? Because you also need to cater for refurbishing the house and all the rest of it. So do you face the same situation in New York? Is there such thing as an upper rent limit, or do you intend to do so?
So I mentioned that we do have a rent regulation system. Our current predominant system is rent stabilization, and it covers almost 1 million units in the city. It is a bit more complicated and nuanced than just an upper rent limit. And what it does is there's a centralized board that every year sets a cap on the amount on an annual increase, that for those units that are covered by the system, right? So it's roughly 50% of our units. The owner can only increase each year by that percent. So historically, it's been about 3%. In the prior mayoral administration, we had increases as much as 8%. We actually did have 1 or 2 years of a rent freeze.
Yep.
In addition, there are ways that owners can get additional bumps up, right, through investing in the units, either building-wide capital improvements or individual apartment increases. And there, for a long period of time, was also an extra bump up at vacancy, for example. So it is not, we don't have a blanket cap that applies to all units in the city, or even that just applies to the regulated units. It is a bit more complicated, but we have had some form of rent regulation since the late 1940s. So it's a pretty long history that we have with this experiment.
Yeah. So you also provide tax deductions, and you give incentives to bring down the costs and to stimulate the market in that regard?
I wouldn't say at this point we're actually trying to stimulate the market. The market is actually quite stimulated on its own. But in terms of trying to make the development of affordable housing more affordable, we use a combination of direct subsidy, low interest loans, a lot of certainly tax incentives. We'll also use those things to help out small owners who need to make big upgrades to their building and can't otherwise afford it. And they can come to us, and we can, any of those sources we'll use there. And also we do incentivize market rate owners who want to build bigger than is otherwise allowed through the zoning, through various tax incentive programs and otherwise, to include an affordable component of it. So we're using those things strategically. And I said we used to be in a time period in the 70s and 80s where we were trying to jumpstart the market or incentivize conversion, and it's less of that now and more about trying to get affordability or buy affordability or incentivize affordability wherever we can.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the floor to Lucy? Yes, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Hello. I was wondering. So one of the issues with housing, and especially in New York, or it's basically supply of housing. One of the pillars. I wouldn't say it's like the whole issue, but and I remember reading a paper in the last year where they said that 70% of Manhattan cannot be built right now, for example, under the current regulations. So, is that a right figure? Did I read the paper right, or what can we do about it?
So it's an interesting debate. I would say that there are some people that fall on the side that we need stronger tenant protections, such as rent stabilization, and we need to invest in strengthening that. And there are some people that argue that we need to be allowing some more supply, right? And for example, increasing our zoning so that we can get more density and more units. And I think the city falls somewhere in between, right? Both are necessary, and we've advocated for stronger rent protections, as well as we're looking constantly at areas that can be rezoned or upzoned to allow additional density. Density in and of itself is not the answer alone, and there's certainly some constraints on supply where not all of those units or when those units are put into the market, they're not necessarily going to be affordable units. So as I mentioned, it's going to have to be a combination of all of these strategies that we're investing in to really tackle this multifaceted and sort of intractable problem that we're having.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Hi, Lucy. I wanted to ask you something. As I understand, in New York, there is a lot of buildings that are private property, that they have rent-regulated houses. So what happens when the person who lives in this apartment doesn't pay the rent?
Well, we have both, on the one hand, sort of a strong history of tenant rights, but then we have very active housing courts, right? And most of those issues get negotiated out or resolved through housing court. If someone does not pay their rent, a landlord may bring the tenant to housing court. And for a long time, those tenants were not always represented, right? They did not have an attorney there with them. So one of the big pushes is that, obviously if people don't pay their rent, we have in New York City still a lot of small and medium-sized building owners, and that can obviously be a big impediment to someone continuing to operate their building. But we also know that you need to have a fair system where tenants are represented, and when people are not, when people are sort of evicted or lose their homes, it causes a huge range of other public policy challenges. So continues to be a balance.
Yeah, thank you.
How many days or time do you need to resolve that situation? Because, for example, here in Spain, we have a very big problem on that. If you go to a court, you can stay 3 or 4 years.
We're a little bit outside of my area of expertise. It is not a fast process for sure, but I don't know that it's that long of a process. But I certainly, as I said, we as the city are in a unique position, right? We have, as our constituents and as our policy focus, both ensuring that we're protecting tenants, but also ensuring that owners, including small and medium-sized building owners, can continue to survive. So it's always going to be a tough call there.
Thank you very much for the question. We need to move on. I'm sorry that I need to push a little. Anais and Jonathan, thank you very much again. You were talking about basically a form of densification, right?
Yes.
Can you make it a bit more tangible as well? So do you have an area where you could say, okay, there's an increase of people living in this area of about, let's say, 20, 30, 50%? Do you have an example for us?
Not off the top of my head, but what you are finding in the areas that we are working in, there are low-income areas, and they're obviously the most affordable areas for people who are coming from outside to enter the city. So those, well, we are at the Smart Cities Congress, so I guess a data study could be done to understand which areas need them most. But then there's also the flip side of this is also understanding which local councils would be more willing to this type of densification as opposed to not. And I think that's the big key in unlocking a project like this. It's understanding the local councils and the local authorities that you're dealing with and their planning policies, as well as the bureaucratic processes that go along with it and who would be willing to welcome it. I think the key is to avoid sprawling.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest key, to sort of try and lock the city. At the extent of it is already too big, and we had a discussion earlier about poverty traps. The people that are stuck on the periphery spend the most to get into the city and therefore cannot alleviate themselves. So I think that's the biggest key, is to avoid a sprawling city of informality and try and lock it and set up the correct systems where densification can happen safely.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, to stop sprawling. That's fair enough. So probably we have to already summarize, because we've got only a couple of minutes left, unless there's a pressing questions that you need to get rid of to Anais and Jonathan. I give you a second to raise your hand. No, there is not. So I think we had three very different presentations. They're all tackling this huge problem of affordability. As I already mentioned, there are technologies in place, like this platform that Damiano was talking about. I think it's a different approach. What I like about it is that the basis of it, if I may say so, is a different consciousness. Because a different consciousness in terms of, okay, yes, we do have a revenue coming in, but we share it with others in order to create a benefit for all. I think that's really good. And if we would start to think a bit more along these lines, I think we would shape our future cities very different. So I like your approach. Of course, I can completely align with Lucy with the problems that she has, that New York is facing, because Berlin seems to be very similar. We're talking about leverage private investment, talking about public engagement, also probably shift in the consciousness and importance of data for decision making. That's also what you mentioned, because that's really important. I mean, how can you do decision making when you're lacking the data for it? Last but not least, Cape Town as something actually far away, but not so far away, but because urban sprawl happens also in Berlin. People are moving out of the city because they can't afford staying within a certain area. So we also need to tackle this area. So thank you all very much for your presentations. They enlightened our knowledge, so probably we should give them a round of applause again. Thank you very much. Eva, am I supposed to hand over to you? Are you addressing us? You don't have a microphone. So you're coming to us. So thank you very much. Eva is going to address us only for 1 or 2 minutes, it seems. The floor is yours, Eva. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Eckhart. So we have reached the end of today's session on the right to the city, during which we have discussed in depth about housing, about gentrification, and about urban social justice. And the different contributions delivered by the two keynotes earlier and by the four panelists that intervened now have allowed us to discover local policies linked to the right to the city, policies implemented in the cities of Buenos Aires, in the city of New York, or Cape Town, for instance. And we have also had the chance to see civil society and how civil society initiatives and practices are playing a key role developing alternative for greater urban equality, justice, and sustainability. And in this regard, we had the chance to know more about Airbnb. So in short, we have seen that the right to the city can only be a reality if the different urban stakeholders get together, get engaged. So institutions, civil society, academia, and companies need to work together to realize the right to the city. Because the urban transformation that is proposed by the right to the city is deep and is also controverted. And this is why it needs a coalition of different strategies. It needs the pressure of citizen mobilizations and initiatives. It also needs the political and legal changes provided by institutions. And last but not least, it needs a change in the predominant values of society. So to put it in other words, it needs a paradigm shift. Thank you very much to all the guests that today have allowed us to imagine how we can work towards this paradigm shift and how we can build more inclusive and fair cities. So thank you very much.